All right, so thanks to Lou and Katie for the opportunity to present today. My name is Emily, and I'm based in Anchorage, Alaska, which is on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina. And today I'll be talking about balancing work and homeschooling. So I'm going to echo a lot of what Isabel said, but I'll be putting a little bit of a parental spin on it. So I think one of the big challenges that we've talked about today with working remotely is figuring out how to manage your time. Since we no longer have this external cue of being able to commute every day, we don't have a strict start and end date to our day. And then that issue is made even more complicated when you not only live at work, but your whole family is also living at work with you. So how do you manage that? So those are things that I'll be talking about today. So a lot of studies have come out over the last year that have revealed the toll of the pandemic on careers, particularly women's careers. And this really highlights the immense challenge of juggling childcare responsibilities while working full time. And so I can't give a presentation without having this as something that we should be thinking about. But I think the other thing that I want to bring up is that it's not only difficult for us as we're managing full-time childcare with full-time work. We didn't ask for it, but our kids also didn't ask for it. And so I think that's something to keep in mind, is that it's hard for us, but it's hard for them as well. So a little bit about me. I am the conference fund manager at Code for Science and Society, which is a US-based nonprofit. And I actually just started working there last January, a couple months before the pandemic started. And I'm very privileged. I'm in a great position, really, because I have a very flexible schedule. I have a lot of control over how I spend my time. And the organization that I work for is really welcoming to families. So it's a place where we, especially over the last year, have given each other a lot of grace and space as we've all handled the pandemic differently, and we've all had different challenges that we've been facing. And yeah, it's just overall a very supportive, family-friendly work environment. So that helps a lot. It takes a lot of the stress off of my shoulders. And I have two kids. They are 3 and 6, and we pulled them out of daycare last March. When the pandemic started. We actually didn't have a choice because their daycare closed. And I thought to myself, okay, we're going to have a few weeks where we don't have childcare, and it's going to be really hard, and then things will go back to normal. So I never thought that almost a year ago that we would still be in this situation. And so we've learned a lot over the last year about how to manage our careers, both my husband and me, while also managing our children being at home. And our older daughter started kindergarten in the fall. And so we've been doing a homeschool curriculum with her this year. So not only in 2020 did I not only start a new job, but I also learned how to be a kindergarten teacher. So this is an example of my workday. So what's worked out really well for my husband and me is that we're both early risers. So usually we get up around 5:30, and I am most productive in the early morning hours. So really the block of time between 6 and 9 a.m. tends to be really deep focus time for me. It's a time where I like to schedule meetings because I know I'm not going to get interrupted. It's also a time where I like to try to squeeze in about a half hour of exercise. Usually my kids don't get up until about 8:30 or 9, which is really helpful for us. We get a head start on the day. And then that 8:30 to 3 p.m. block is when I'm alternating between working and homeschooling. And I liken this to a relay race with myself, where I am constantly passing the baton between my work self and my homeschool self, where I have to keep switching my brain between teaching and working. And then my husband and I are also tagging off who's keeping a loose eye on the kids, depending on our meeting schedules for the day. Typically in the afternoon, I take my dog for an hour walk. She and I both need exercise. And usually my productivity hits a slump in the afternoon. So rather than wasting time sitting at my computer trying to get things done, it's a good opportunity to go outside and get some fresh air. And this relates back to the January community call focused on resilience and the importance of getting our own needs met. And I oftentimes think of what we learned when we used to fly on airplanes, that we have to put our own oxygen mask on before helping others. So by taking these exercise breaks during the day, it really helps me to do that. So typically after I walk my dog, I go back to my office for some more deep focus time. And then from about 6 p.m. on, it's family time. So some of the benefits, again, I have a very flexible schedule, which has been very helpful. And I think one of the keys to balancing your work life with your kids and homeschooling is to be flexible. So there are mornings that our daughter will wake up at 5:30 in the morning with us, and she'll be ready to go and she'll be focused. And it's a great time to like sit her down and do her lessons while her younger sister is still sleeping. And so that throws my morning routine out of whack, but then it means at least we've gotten her lessons done for the day. And yeah, so every day is different. One of the challenges is that I don't have a set schedule. It really depends on my meeting schedule and that of my husband. This is what it typically looks like. So again, I really try to focus on those hours of the day in which I'm most productive. And I also try to schedule meetings for this time. And then really the exercise blocks are non-negotiable. And this is a really important aspect of self-care. So even if I feel like I'm a little bit behind on work, I still take the time to take the dog for a walk. And I find that it really helps me unblock. So if there are challenges that I'm facing, either with homeschooling or with working, usually going out and getting exercise outside for an hour can help me think about problems in a new way and help me to get through them. So again, I'm going to echo some of the things that Isabel was saying. One of the things that's been really important for me is thinking about how to optimize my efficiency. So I think for those of us who are juggling full-time childcare with full-time work, we're not in a position where we can sit at our desk for 8 hours a day. So we really need to think about how to optimize the time that we are sitting at our desk during the day. So one of the things that I do is try to automate and document. So as is true for a lot of you, I'm sure, I spend a lot of time documenting my processes. And this is helpful for future me because I tend to do the same tasks more than once. And it's also helpful for my coworkers because they know where I store files, they know where I store my workflows, and so they know how to get information from me. And that saves a lot of back and forth with email or Slack trying to get information shared with each other. I also keep a to-do list that's always up on my screen. And the window that I have up is my critical to-do list. So there are things that absolutely need to get done. And then as Isabel said, I also have some tasks that would be nice to do. So usually those are blog posts that I'm interested in writing and just haven't been able to sit down and write them yet, but they're ideas that I have that might still be in the early stages that if I have the time to do them, I'll do them. So it's really important to prioritize and figure out what actually needs to get done and what are some things that would be nice to do if the time presents itself. And the other thing that I think about is being present. So one of the things that is challenging again is switching back and forth between teaching and working. And so one of the things that I've been really intentional about doing is when I'm sitting at my desk, I'm thinking about work. And when I'm upstairs in my house teaching my daughter, I'm thinking about school. So it can be tempting sometimes to bring my laptop upstairs and try to bang out an email while she's doing some independent work. But really that's not helping me and it's not helping her, and it's just going to take more time. So really trying to focus on the task at hand. And I think one of the things that's helpful is I have geographic separation in my house between where the homeschooling happens and where the office happens. So I get to commute up and down the stairs as I transition between homeschooling and working, and that helps me to shift my brain. Oh, and so some of the tools that I use, Isabel brought up Toggle, and that can be helpful if you're working too much during the week. That can help you kind of keep track of your daily hours to make sure you're not working around the clock. What I like toggle for are for those tasks that you do that are recurring. So for example, if you set up a monthly community call, it can be helpful to know actually how long it takes you to do all the steps in setting that up. And then that helps you, if you have a few minutes before a meeting starts, you can think, okay, I know it takes me 8 minutes approximately to put together a when to meet poll for my next committee meeting. So I'm going to sit down and do that before my next Zoom meeting starts. And that keeps me from doom scrolling on Twitter or wasting my time in other ways. Calendly is something that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And that, again, just saves a lot of back and forth in terms of scheduling meetings. That I can just send people my Calendly link and they can sign up for a time for us to meet, and then it's done. Jotform is a new tool that I've been exploring for doing surveys and other types of registration forms. And what's nice about Jotform is that they have a report feature. So if I want to look at basic data visualization for a survey that I'm doing, I can just hit create a report and it'll create the series of graphs for me that visualize the data. And so I don't need to spend the time making the graphs. The reports are not perfect. There are things that I would want to do to improve them before sharing them, but at least it saves me the time of having to make preliminary data visualizations. So another thing that I'm careful to do is to guard my time. So I try to do things in advance as much as possible. If I get some spare time on the weekend, I'll get a kickstart on what needs to get done during the week. As another example, this winter, I've been putting together a blog series based on professional development events that I've been doing with our grantees. And I queue those blog posts up as soon as they're ready. They're scheduled to get published on the website. And that way, the day that I want to publish them, I don't need to go into the website and get it set up and hit publish. It's already queued up and ready to go. Again, I try to schedule meetings at the beginning and end of my day when I'm pretty sure I have a low likelihood of getting interrupted. One of the things that's been working out well with my colleagues is scheduling work blocks instead of Zoom meetings. So if we're doing collaborative writing, for example, we'll set a calendar invite where we plan for an hour to asynchronously work on a document. And so we're both in there, we're editing, but we don't need to have our cameras on. We don't need to be talking to each other. We might send a few messages over Slack, but that way, if one of us has to get up and do something for a few minutes, we don't need to worry about pausing the video and muting and coming back into the meeting. We can just walk away and come back. And having that work block on my calendar means that the task will get done because it's scheduled. And I can tell my family, okay, I have a meeting during this hour. And I can just have that time set aside to do the task. I've removed my office from the chaos. So as I mentioned, my office is downstairs, so I do have a little bit of a commute. I work out of a closet in my basement. And what's nice about this is that it's a little bit harder for people to come in and interrupt during the day. There's obviously a door that I can shut so I can have a little bit of privacy and solitude. And so that really helps, again, for being present in the moment and focusing on the task. Co-working has also been a big saving grace for me. Again, having time set on my calendar that is a focused work block is really helpful for me and my productivity. And having an accountability partner is helpful for getting things done. When Stephanie and I meet, we can talk about what we're doing. We can talk about any blockers that we're having in the work that we're doing. And it's also a way to kind of recreate the organic water cooler conversations that some of us are missing out on when we used to work in person. So we can check in on each other. We get to talk to an adult that doesn't live in our house. We can find out how everyone's doing. It's just kind of a nice way to have that social interaction, but also have the time set aside to get work done. And the other thing that we've been thinking about over the last year is what can you let go of or automate at home? So my house is a mess and it's a bummer and it's frustrating and it's something I'm trying to let go of. My husband and I don't like to spend time vacuuming because we have other things to do. So we got a Roomba and now the Roomba takes care of the vacuuming. And the added benefit is that our kids have to keep their toys off the floor. Otherwise our Roomba will eat them. So think about things that perhaps you can either let go of and not prioritize so much or find a way to automate or have someone else take care of it for you. So a couple of tools here. Reclaim.ai is a calendar tool that will sync your personal and your work calendars together. And so if there are things on your personal calendar, they will get blocked off in your work calendar, so nobody can schedule meetings with you during that time. And Reclaim will also schedule time for you in the morning to catch up on whatever happened the night before, time in the afternoon to wind down at the end of the day. It schedules lunch for you, so you don't forget to eat lunch. And so all of these times are blocked off where no one can schedule meetings with you. And along these same lines, if you use Google Calendar with your colleagues, set working hours. And so if your working hours are 9 to 5, make yourself unavailable outside of those working hours, and then nobody can schedule time with you. So essentially what I'm saying here is don't make yourself limitlessly available, set boundaries on your time. And then the other app that I use is the Forest app. And so this is what I use when I co-work with Stephanie. We usually work in 25-minute blocks, and Forest keeps me from playing around on my phone during that 25-minute time. It forces me to go into deep focus time. So the last technique that I'll share is making time for reflection. So I think for those of us who are, again, balancing childcare and full-time work, it can feel like we're constantly putting out fires and we're running on a treadmill and not getting anywhere, not getting anything done. But the reality is that we're getting a lot done. And so one of the things that we do at our organization is we have weekly wins and blockers, where we can talk about what were our successes for the week, what are the things we're really struggling with, and what are we planning to work on the week after. And I also send weekly updates to my program's advisory committee so that they know what I've been working on during the week. And that helps me to reflect on actually what we're getting done. And I put the weekly updates up on our program website, so I have some accountability that I actually have to get them done every week. And a tool that I've been exploring with some of my colleagues is the Year Compass. And this is a guided reflection exercise that helps us to unpack everything that happened in 2020 and think about how our lives have changed, both for the better and perhaps a little bit for the worse. And it helps us to reframe our goals. And I think having the time, again, in my schedule to go through and do these reflective exercises is really helpful. It helps me to clear my head. And again, it helps me think about the things that we have accomplished and how we've been using our time in the last year. So there's an expression that I started hearing when I became a parent, that the days are long, but the weeks are short. And so I think engaging in these reflective exercises helps you to kind of keep an eye on your time and think about what you're actually getting done. So there's this question that I've been thinking about recently, which is, now that we are living at work, is what are we teaching our kids about our careers? So we are implicitly and explicitly sharing our career lives with our kids on a regular basis, whether it be our affect as we transition in and out of meetings, or talking with our spouses or partners about what our workday is like. There are things that they're picking up on. And so one of the things when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time at my mom's work, and she worked at a public radio station. And when I was younger, they would give me very basic office tasks to do to keep me out of trouble. So I would stuff envelopes and alphabetize. And then as I got older, they started giving me some really cool opportunities. So I had a chance as a high school student to do an interview series with women scientists about their careers. The summer before I went to college, I was their receptionist. And so being in that work environment, I think was really impactful for me. I didn't end up going into journalism. I don't do anything on radio, but I learned a lot about how a nonprofit works just from being in that environment. And I also learned that I like talking to people and I like public speaking. And so these are things that I've brought with me into my current career. So I encourage you to kind of think about the situation that you're in, and based on what your job entails and how old your kids are, think about how you can share your career with them. So for my husband and me, we've been teaching our kids basic coding which is good for young kids. It teaches them how to problem solve, and it teaches them about cause and effect. And my husband being an engineer, he spends a lot of time looking at drawings, and our younger daughter really likes to sit on his lap and look at drawings with him. And she's really excited to be an engineer when she grows up. And will she be an engineer? I don't know. That's not really the point. But the point is that they're learning about different types of careers. So my final thoughts are to be honest about constraints on your time, and be honest with yourself, and also be honest with the people that you work with. So for me, I try to have a 24-hour rule before I commit to doing something new. So I have a full day to think about, do I really want to take this on? Does this align with my goals? Is this good use of my time? And also, it's better to be upfront about what your constraints are than to overpromise and underdeliver. Also, again, echoing Isabel, think about breaking up your tasks into things that need to get done and things that would be nice to do, so you can prioritize and then see what you can delegate to others. Think about whether you really need to schedule that meeting. Do you really need to have a face-to-face conversation to get something done, or is it something that you can do asynchronously? So for me, with my work schedule, it's a lot easier for me to work on things asynchronously because I can do them on my own time where I don't have to coordinate with someone else. So think about maybe scheduling those work blocks where you don't necessarily need to do a face-to-face check-in, but at least you have the time scheduled on your calendar to get a task done. Again, be present in the moment. Remember that you're not alone. So I think one of the potentially good things that could come out of the pandemic is that the struggles of working parents are now really impossible to ignore. So these are things that many of us have been struggling with on our own, kind of behind closed doors. But now it's really unavoidable as we see our kids popping up in the background of our Zoom meetings. And we're trying to really balance our time. And there's a lot more of us who are struggling with it now. And lastly, if you feel like you have the capacity, I encourage you to be an advocate. So think about ways that you can advocate not only for working parents, but for people who are also, everyone's dealing with things outside of work in different ways. So it could be people with a chronic medical condition. It could be people who are caring for an elderly relative or a partner. We all have things outside of work that are competing for our mental energy and for our time. So you can advocate for things like flexible working hours or having Flex Fridays, which is something that our organization started over the summer, or even just having one day a week in which there are no meetings, so that that you have one day a week in which you can do work uninterrupted. And so these are small changes that have potential to greatly help working parents, but they also will greatly help the greater community by having these small changes. And then the last thought that I'll leave you all with is an expression that my husband and I have been using quite a bit lately, courtesy of Slack, is that sometimes you eat the bear and sometimes the bear eats you. So there are days in which you're a superhero and you're able to get everything done and life is good. And then there are days where it doesn't go so well. But the good thing is that you always get to try again the next day. So don't be too hard on yourself. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time. It's been great to be able to talk through some of these ideas with you, and I look forward to talking about them more in the breakout session. And if you are interested in co-working, you're welcome to message me on Slack.